All right, let's talk about Bob Dylan. For more than 60 years, people have been trying to pin him down. Is he a poet, a prophet, a rock star? The labels just don't stick. So in this explainer, we're going to try something different. We're going to look past all that mythology and find the real person by following this one single kind of hidden clue that, well, it changes everything. It reframes his entire life. And it all starts with the name he was given at birth.
So his birth name was Robert Allen Zimmermann, and right there in that name is this incredible clue. See, Zimmermann in German means carpenter, a craftsman, someone who works with their hands, who builds things that are meant to last. This isn't just some random trivia, okay? It's like a blueprint for his entire life. He might have changed the name, but he never, ever stopped being that craftsman.
Now, to really get this craftsman idea, we need to go way back. I'm talking about a 1,000-year-old German tradition called the Walz. It was this required journey, right? If you were an apprentice craftsman and you wanted to become a master, you had to do it. You had to leave home, wander all over, learning from different masters in different workshops. Your whole life was the road. And this ancient tradition, it's the perfect key to unlocking Bob Dylan's entire career.
Okay, Section 1, the journeyman's apprenticeship. A young craftsman arrives in the big city to learn his trade. So just like the tradition says, our young craftsman, Robert Zimmermann, he has to leave home. And for him, home was this place called Hibbing, Minnesota. I mean, think about it, a dying mining town, a place that was literally digging its own grave. He just knew deep down that his work, his real apprenticeship, had to be somewhere else.
So here he is, showing up in New York City in 1961. And he's not just drifting. No, he has one mission: to find his first master, his idol, Woody Guthrie. And Guthrie is dying in a hospital over in New Jersey. So what does Dylan do? He goes to his bedside and plays him songs. I mean, that's exactly what a journeyman does. He seeks out the master. He went right to the source. And then, just a year later, his first album drops. And that's when his real apprenticeship in the huge workshop of New York City really kicks off. You see, for Dylan, Greenwich Village, it wasn't just a cool scene. Not at all. It was a city full of workshops. He wasn't there to become a star. Not yet. He was there to learn. So the clubs, those are his classrooms. The stages, his workbenches. And all the other artists playing there, they were the masters of the craft he was so desperate to figure out. And man, the village was just packed with masters. You had the gruff guitarist Dave Van Ronk. Dylan soaked up his technique. He listened to Irish folk groups like the Clancy Brothers and learned all about phrasing and how to tell a story in a song. He studied Rambling Jack Elliott and that whole wandering folk singer persona. It's like with every person he met, he was adding a new tool to his toolbox. He was literally building himself one piece at a time. Right, on to our next chapter, The Master's Daughter. An encounter that would change the trajectory of American music. In that old craftsman tradition, the real seal of approval, the ultimate validation for a journeyman, was getting accepted by the master's own family. And right there in the middle of this busy workshop of Greenwich Village, Dylan was about to meet the absolute, undisputed queen of the entire folk scene. And this meeting, it was going to change everything.
I mean, you couldn't have picked two more different people. It's 1963. On one hand, you've got Joan Baez. She's already a master, the folk queen. Her voice is legendary. She's selling out huge concert halls. And then, on the other hand, you've got Bob Dylan, this kind of scruffy, totally unknown journeyman with a harmonica rack and a guitar he was still kind of wrestling with. He had raw potential, for sure. But she had everything else. But that's the thing about a true master, right? They don't just see what's in front of them. They see what's coming. And Baez, she heard the future in Dylan's raw, unfinished songs. She totally took on that role of the master's daughter, the one who gives the apprentice her blessing. She brought him out on her stage in front of her enormous audience and basically told the world, this guy is the real deal. She co-signed his genius before anyone else even saw it. But here's the rule of the waltz. A craftsman can't settle down. His loyalty isn't to one workshop. It's to the journey itself. So when Dylan walks onto the stage at the Newport Folk Festival in 1965 and plugs in an electric guitar, well, the folk world completely lost it. They saw it as the ultimate betrayal. But if you look at it through this craftsman lens, it makes perfect sense. It was just necessary. He'd learned everything he could from that particular workshop. It was time to keep moving. So let's look at the myth versus the man, because the world saw an icon, but the truth was often stranger. As his journey went on, this guy who just wanted to be a good craftsman, he gets turned into this massive global myth,
the voice of a generation, all of that. But the actual guy behind the legend, oh, he was way more slippery and, let's be honest, a lot weirder. Just think about the scale of his fame for a second. It was just astronomical. We're talking over 25 million recordings sold worldwide. He became one of the most famous people on the entire planet, a legitimate icon. And yet there's this story. Fast forward to 2009. A cop in New Jersey gets a call about some strange old guy wandering around in somebody's yard in the pouring rain. So she gets there, and this man, who's wearing 2 raincoats for some reason, says he's Bob Dylan. And of course, the cop doesn't believe him for a second, not until they actually run his ID. And that's the whole paradox, isn't it? The global superstar who could still get mistaken for a homeless person. For the longest time, nobody could really get behind the myth. And then, this guy Anthony Scaduto comes along. Now, Scaduto wasn't a music critic. He was a crime reporter for the New York Post. And he approached Dylan's story not like a fanboy, but like a real investigation. He treated Dylan's life like a cold case, tracking down and interviewing everyone from the early days to try and find the real story behind the legend. And then, the most amazing thing happened. Bob Dylan actually cooperated. He read the whole book and even talked about it with Scaduto. So what was his big review? What was his final verdict? He said, and I quote, "I rather enjoyed it." Now, you have to understand, for Bob Dylan, that's like a 5-star glowing review. It was this incredibly rare moment where he basically admitted, yeah, this guy, he actually got pretty close to the truth, to the story of the craftsman. All right, on to the final part, the master's certificate, because after a lifetime on the road, he gets the ultimate validation. So this journeyman, he just kept going, kept working for decade after decade. And then, after all that time on the road, his craft finally got the highest recognition you can possibly imagine. Yep, in 2016, the world was just stunned. Bob Dylan, the songwriter, the musician, the kid from Minnesota, was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. The official reason? For creating new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. And this brings us right back to where we started. Remember the waltz? At the end of that long journey, a German craftsman finally gets their Meisterbrief, their master's certificate. It's the official piece of paper that proves they did the work, they finished the journey, and they achieved mastery. The Nobel Prize? That was Bob Dylan's Meisterbrief. It was the ultimate proof that this carpenter of words had built something that was going to last forever. But that leaves us with one last question, doesn't it? One of the journeyman's most famous lines is, "He not busy being born is busy dying." So for a guy like Dylan, a true craftsman whose whole life, whose whole identity is about the journey, about wandering and creating, does the work ever really stop? Is the journey ever truly finished? Or was that master certificate, that Nobel Prize, just another stop on a road that never ends?